Spoken word only, emotionally heavy, viral tone, psychological dissent begins here. They tried to erase me. Not in the loud, obvious way history books record, but in the quiet, surgical precision of bureaucracy, the kind of erasure where power is passed to the naive and wisdom gets labeled non-compliant. Let me ask you something, friend. What happens when the architect of the system becomes its enemy? It was 7:04 a.m. The knock on my door wasn't just impatient, it was imperial. I knew that rhythm. HOA power, but the woman standing behind it, she had no idea who she was dealing with. Blonde bob stiff with hairspray, pearls tight around her neck like a noose made of status, and a binder, God help us all, the dreaded HOA binder. Patricia Belmont, the new queen of our cul-de-sac empire. She didn't say hello, she said violation. Mailbox 2.7 inches too low, fence paint too weathered beige. My flagpole? Non-registered vertical obstruction? She rattled off regulations like scripture, expecting me to bow. I didn't. Because, see, this wasn't just my home. This was my creation. In 1972, I wrote the damn town charter. I designed the roads she drives on. I laid the pipes under her kitchen sink. But none of that mattered to Patricia. She had the binder, and in her eyes, that binder made her God. She wasn't here for order, she was here for domination. And that's the part they never tell you. HOA power attracts the hungry, not for justice, but for control. The same spirit that builds empires can also birth tyrants in cul-de-sacs. Because tyranny doesn't always wear a crown, it wears a name tag and holds meetings in the community center. But Patricia? She wasn't just enforcing rules, she was reviving a forgotten war. And she was standing on a landmine she didn't even know existed. I invited her inside, calm, unshaken, the way a man does when he holds the original, blueprint in his desk drawer, and knows the system better than the system knows itself. She came in swinging rules. I handed her the law. And in that instant, when her eyes landed on my signature at the bottom of the 1972 charter, everything changed. She thought she was the gatekeeper, but I was the architect of the gates. Spoken word only, draws viewer deeper into the psychological unraveling, emotionally heavier, tone, dangerous truths unfolding. Power doesn't corrupt, it reveals. And in Patricia Belmont's case, it revealed everything. See, men like me, we don't yell, we build, we don't fight in the open, we outlast, we observe. For 50 years, I watched HOA presidents come and go. Most meant well, a few were clumsy, but Patricia came with fire in her eyes and conquest in her blood. Not to protect the neighborhood, but to rule it. And that's the part that stung the worst. She had no idea what this place meant, what it was built for. Back in 1972, when I wrote that charter, I wasn't just putting words on paper. I was encoding a vision, a community built on reason, flexibility, honor, not perfection, not conformity. That preamble she skipped, it was the soul of the entire town. But she didn't see soul, she saw targets. So she came at me with citations, certified letters, fines for my garden gnomes, my mailbox, even the color of my damn welcome mat. It was warfare, but dressed in khakis and lipstick. She wanted to make an example of me. But something strange happened. She stirred the old roots, and the town remembered. Bob Patterson knocked on my door, basketball hoop violation. Susan Chen, wind chimes too loud. Ethel Morrison, 90 years old, fined for her rose bushes exceeding maximum foliage density. That's when it hit me. This wasn't personal, it was structural. Patricia had become the algorithm of petty tyranny, automated, relentless, blind to history. She didn't just ignore the charter, she was violating it with every smug letter she mailed. And worse, she thought she was right. But I had something she didn't. Time, history, and evidence. So I gathered my files, every zoning map, planning note, correspondence from the founding days. I wasn't just defending myself, I was preparing for war. The war for the soul of the community. And I knew one thing Patricia didn't. The one who understands the foundation owns the house. Now listen closely. This is where your role begins. If you've ever faced false power, someone trying to dominate you with rules they don't even understand, Comment, "I remember the foundation" twice below. Say it once for the man you are, and once for the man you're becoming. Lock it in. Let the world know you're not asleep anymore. Because in the next act, I show you how the system that tried to bury me ended up digging its own grave. Spoken word only. Heavier, sharper, dissent continues. Tone, mentor revealing institutional rot. Intensity escalating. They say systems are built to last. But systems built without memory. Rot. And that's what Patricia didn't understand, what so many like her never do. When you separate rules from wisdom, when you enforce structure without understanding its spine, you turn leadership into tyranny. That's how empires fall. And that's how HOA boards turn into dictatorships in heels. She called a public meeting. Not to listen. Not to learn. To humiliate me. The agenda. The Hartley situation. Printed in bold. Posted across the community. Like I was a criminal. 20 minutes of PowerPoint. Each slide more ridiculous than the last. My gnomes circled in red. My birdbath labeled unauthorized structure. My mailbox treated like a national threat. She stood at the podium like a prosecutor before a jury. But what she didn't know? I built the damn courthouse. I stood up slowly, papers in hand. The room was packed. Neighbors I'd greeted for decades now staring at me like I was the ghost of the town they forgot they had. And then I spoke, not as a defendant, but as a founder. "This is the original planning proposal," I said, holding up the first sheet. "Submitted in 1971, signed by the council. Designed to ensure beauty, but never at the cost of humanity." Slide after slide, I dismantled her narrative. That flagpole. Permitted in 1973. Grandfathered by clause. That mailbox. Measured wrong. Baseline starts at the curb, not the sidewalk. Those gnomes. Protected under Section 12. Explicitly, by my own hand. And then, I dropped the hammer. Article 2, Section 3 of the Charter. Read aloud. "No regulation shall be enforced in a manner that contradicts the fundamental principle of reasonable community living." You could feel the air change. Men shifted in their seats. Women stare. Spoken word only. The dissent continues. Truth becomes confrontation, and confrontation becomes justice. Tone, mythic, precise, and devastating. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes. It signs motions. Bob Patterson stood up first. "I move that we table all citations until the board reviews its own compliance with the charter," he said. His voice was steady, but his eyes, they were burning. Not just for me, but for himself, for his daughter's basketball hoop, for the neighbors afraid to hang wind chimes or fly a flag. 3 voices echoed his motion, a rising chorus, men waking up. The board members looked down at their hands like they were holding weapons they didn't mean to carry. Patricia tried to stop it, declared the meeting adjourned. But I didn't flinch. "According to Robert's Rules of Order," I said calmly, "you're required to address a motion already on the floor." And that was it. The moment the wolf's teeth slipped through the sheep's mask. That night, I watched decades of quiet resentment erupt into structure. The motion passed. Then came another, a full audit of all citations issued in the past 6 months. Passed. Then a vote to review board qualifications. Passed. Patricia stood frozen, trapped in a room she once controlled. A queen without her crown, her binder, closed, forgotten. And in that silence, we didn't just reclaim a neighborhood. We reclaimed memory. The aftermath was surgical. Over $10,000 in illegal fines. Residents demanding restitution. A trail of missteps, missing training documents, and worse. Late fees pocketed for administrative expenses. That's when the letters started. First from the residents, then the state. The Attorney General launched an investigation into financial misconduct. Patricia tried to run. Tried to lawyer up. Tried to hide behind the very charter she'd weaponized. But the charter had a longer memory than she. Spoken word only. Tone intensifies. Truth becomes weaponized. The system crumbles. Justice becomes transformation. Viewer's identity deepens. I wasn't there to humiliate her. I was there to remind the system who built it. But justice has a way of turning the mirror, doesn't it? A week after the meeting, the audit findings went public. Patricia had never completed the legally required board training. She'd issued over 80 citations, 43 of them invalid, 19 based on misinterpretations, and at least a dozen completely fabricated. And the money? The money was missing. Late fees never reached the community fund. Processing charges? Made up. The books told a story her binder couldn't hide. Then came the special election. 147-3. That's how the neighborhood voted her out. 3 votes left. Probably her husband, her dog, and the mirror. No one stood with her, not after what was revealed. Her kingdom crumbled, not because I yelled, but because I documented. That's what men forget. In a world screaming with chaos, it's the man who remains composed, prepared, precise, who wins dot. And then came the knock dot, not at my door, at hers, a process server. Summons in hand, civil suit, $35,000 in damages plus interest, misappropriation of HOA funds, then the criminal charges, embezzlement, fraud, obstruction of charter protocols. She hired one lawyer, then another, but the evidence was heavier than her resume. I was pruning my roses when she signed the papers, the same roses she once tried to fine me for, and I thought, this is what happens when you forget your roots. Dot. She stood in court a shell of her former self. The confident HOA president in pearls was now just a woman in borrowed humility. When the verdict came down, guilty on 3 counts, she wept. $40,000, 200 hours of community service. And one irrevocable truth, the system she tried to manipulate. Spoken word only, final dissent, tone, mythic, solemn, transformative, a call to inner awakening. Viewer's identity is solidified. Legacy replaces conflict. Closure with power. The world will forget her name. But it will remember the lesson. And you, listening right now, you weren't here for entertainment. You were here for initiation. This story, it wasn't just about an HOA or a garden gnome or a flagpole. It was about what happens when small power goes unchecked. And a man remembers who he is. Let me ask you something no one's dared to ask you in years. What were you built to protect? Because this isn't about a neighborhood. It's about your house, your mind, your purpose. They want to shrink you, distract you, get you to argue over mailbox heights while they rewrite the rules of your life behind your back. That's what Patricia represents. Not just a woman on a power trip, but a system, a culture, an era that punishes remembrance and rewards submission. But not you. Not anymore. You heard the knock on your door. And instead of complying, you listened. You stepped back into the blueprint. That charter in my drawer, that was never just ink on paper. It was legacy encoded, like your grandfather's compass. Like the oath you made to yourself when you were a boy that you wouldn't forget who you were, even when the world tried to bury it. They thought I was just an old man with a flagpole. But I was the last keeper of memory. And when I walked into that room, calm, collected, and carrying history, they saw what real power looks like. Not domination, not noise, but precision, clarity, unshakable origin. That's what you must become. So when the next Patricia comes knocking, not just in your HOA, but in your job, your marriage, your government, your soul, you'll know exactly what to do. You won't react. You'll respond with truth, with law, with legacy. You'll rem.